Today we are discussing the visit of External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar to the United Arab Emirates. The External Affairs Minister is currently in the UAE, and this visit will review the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. Ambassador Sharma, how significant is this visit in the light of the fact that we have seen the India-UAE relationship really strengthen in the last few years?
UAE has become one of the most important strategic partners of India in the past few years. The vision statement issued at the virtual meeting between the Prime Minister and the Crown Prince of UAE in February this year actually lays down the sweep of what the two countries have achieved and what they plan to achieve in the coming years. It covers virtually all aspects of bilateral relations for cooperation, and it covers the whole gamut of strategic partnership between India and UAE. So EM Dr. Jaishankar will at this visit cover all the aspects of the strategic partnership which was discussed. Then we had the SEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which was also done in February last. And that again looks after the bilateral relationship, economic relationship in a cooperative framework. Another important dimension was in July this year when they had the I2U2 summit between India, UAE, Israel and the US. And at that summit, the summit statement actually lays down the first steps which will be taken. And these first steps actually involve India and UAE. The UAE is home to the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, and host of COP28 in 2023. UAE is going to invest $2 billion to develop a series of integrated food parks across India, incorporating state-of-the-art technologies which are climate smart. And these technologies will be geared to reduce food waste and spoilage. They would be geared to conserve fresh water and employ renewable energy sources. India will also provide land for this project and will facilitate farmers' integration into the food parks. And US and Israeli private sectors will be invited to lend their expertise and offer innovative solutions. Now, these investments will help maximize crop yields and in turn help tackle food security in South Asia and the Middle East. Other clean energy dimension of the I2U2 group is to advance hybrid renewable energy projects in India, in the Gujarat state, consisting of 300 megawatts of wind and solar capacity, complemented by battery energy storage systems. Now, US Trade and Development Agency has funded this feasibility study for this $330 million project. And UAE-based companies are exploring also opportunities to serve as critical knowledge and investment partners. So these are the kind of very ambitious goals. And as you know, in February, when the vision statement was issued, the vision is to raise India-UAE bilateral trade from $60 billion to $100 billion. So that shows the kind of the vistas which lay ahead between the two countries. And External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar will not only lead the third Joint Commission meeting, but also have strategic dialogue. And his visit is also for 2 days. He will call on other dignitaries in UAE.
Ambassador Sharma, as you pointed out about the I2U2, and we have seen that there's been a lot of analysis about the I2U2 where I stands for India and Israel and U stands for the US and United Arab Emirates. We've also seen a lot of people point to the fact that the success of this grouping, fundamentally one of the reasons is that India and the UAE today share an excellent bilateral relationship. One, would you agree with this analysis? And two, we've also seen that in the last few years, Prime Minister Modi has also visited the Middle East, he has visited the nations, and he has worked on this relationship between India and the Gulf, especially the UAE. Would you agree with the fact that the Prime Minister has also lent his own personal heft to building these relationships?
Indeed, Simran, this is very true. Prime Minister Modi has actually, with his energy and dynamism, focused on the relationship between India and the Gulf countries. And UAE in the front line. It is the most important relationship in addition to the relationship with Saudi Arabia. And our oil imports from them, our expatriates there, the remittances from Indians who are living in UAE, they all bound the two countries so close and so tightly. And to be very topical, the present moment, the Asia Cup cricket, which is India's staple entertainment, the Asia Cup is being held in UAE. And so every evening we see the stadium in UAE. So that is the kind of a visual and tangible, palpable proximity that we have. Now, this proximity has been established through dynamism and leadership of our Prime Minister, who visited UAE. Then UAE Crown Prince was invited to India. And then the Prime Minister again visited for the passing away of the Sheikh Zayed. So that shows the kind of a close, almost family type of relationship. Now, that is the vision that we have, that between the two countries, the meetings should be free and frequent and at a very high level. And all issues are germane to our cooperation and discussion. What you said is very true. And the I2U2 also is anchored on this very solid foundation of bilateral relationship between India and UAE. And apart from the evolving and comprehensive relationship that we have with the US and Israel, so all these four countries are increasing synergy to their cooperation by the I2U2 group. And this synergy is actually at a peak when you see this very visionary projects which deal with contemporary challenges like climate change, clean energy, food security. So these are the things which we are aspiring to achieve. And launching pad is a very substantive and solid relationship which deals with bilateral trade in numerous areas, including oil, which is very important, and the skill development, for instance. They met in February. There was this discussion about the 50 years of foundation of UAE. Now, in these 50 years, UAE has moved in a major way. Its transformation is exemplary. And today it is home to highly skilled persons, and its investment potential, its trade potential, its sports, and the entire gamut that UAE offers in the field of economic cooperation, financing, is important. This is the very opportune time also for India and UAE to harness this synergy and compatibility in their bilateral interests to maximum to newer heights. And I think EAM, Dr. Jaishankar's visit will be the right moment where they can go into the nitty-gritty of bilateral relationship. Just last week, in 23-24 August, there was a senior official level meeting to discuss the agenda for the Joint Commission. It's a meticulously worked out meeting, and it has a substantive agenda. And I'm confident that at this visit, Dr. Jaishankar and his UAE counterpart will advance this agenda in substantive manner and to get tangible progress.
Master Sharma, as you mentioned about the cricket ties between India and UAE, and we also see that the External Affairs Minister has appreciated UAE's strong support for the Indian community, for yoga activities, cricket and cultural cooperation. And we also see that there is a large Indian community which lives and works in the UAE. How much do you think does the fact that there is a strong Indian community which lives there, there is the Indian diaspora there, also what we call the soft power relationship, how much do you think that contributes to the India-UAE ties?
Yes, the soft power actually harnesses the centuries-old relationship which is there between India and the Gulf countries and India and the Emirates. Our expatriates there, they went in the past 50 years, but they also linked with the previous generations who have been living there, who have connected the two countries. The cricket ties, of course, they manifest the kind of confidence that we have today with the UAE. Last year, because of COVID, when we could not hold the IPL here, it was held in the Emirates, and it is a major Indian cricket event. And then Indian films also, there is great interest in UAE in Indian films. So there is this to and fro between the two countries of people-to-people connectivity. Like the Emirates air flights, their number has increased, and when there were problems in the past 2 years about aviation, Emirates connected India to important destinations abroad also. It's one of the preferred airlines, and Indians use Dubai as a transit point to go to Europe and America. So these are the sinews of, people-to-people connectivity, which are getting stronger and wider. And many people of Indian diaspora in UAE who have excellent links with the rulers in Emirates, and they also nourish our relationship.
Ambassador Sharma, How far do you think does this contribute to the fact that the UAE is also now reaching out and it's showing sign of respect for the fact that there are so many Indians who live there and to make them more at home and also a part of the community even though they're living away from home?
Actually, this also shows the self-confidence of the rulers in UAE. They have now arrived at a stage where they can take big leaps to build cooperation with countries. So, like to facilitate the building of a Hindu temple there is reflective of this liberal and confident approach to relationships and to help the diaspora feel at home. Now the perspective is very wide, it is open, and that speaks volumes. And the same ideas like inclusiveness, openness, transparency, plurality, they underpin our approach to cooperation and international relations, both countries.
Ambassador Sharma, if I was to ask you to pick just three focus areas very briefly, which are the three focus areas that you would pick on and say that this probably is the three areas that India and UAE need to focus on so that the strength of this relationship, which we have seen increase in the last few years, can even strengthen further?
Well, I would say that one area of focus is to consolidate what already exists, like these very substantial ties which reflect the $60 billion annual trade. So this should be consolidated. That's one area. The second focus should be these visionary leaps that both countries need to take. Issues like technology to meet the challenge of climate change and renewable energy, food security. These are actually going to be very important in the coming decades as the world passes through crises about fuel and food. So these are the areas where focus would be beneficial to both countries. And the third area I would say is this people-to-people cooperation, which has really grown in leaps and bounds in the past 50 years, ever since UAE was founded. And this is the bulwark of comprehensive, outward-looking, growing relationship. It will help us achieve the vision of reaching $100 billion of trade between the two countries.
With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Simran.